Hey guys, Veebat here with another V Plays, and it occurred to me that I have yet to do a beginner's guide video. I think that's kind of a staple of most YouTube channels, so I figured I'd go over some of the basics and some of the things that I think people should know when first starting out. And let me preface all of this by saying I am by no means an expert at this game. I have just been playing for probably about 3 months now. I did play this game when it came out in closed beta, but I quickly stepped away from it because it was not nearly as good of a game as it has been with the 2.0 update. So I have recently returned, and I do have a bit of a background in aircraft air combatives, so granted this is a video game, so it doesn't necessarily translate, but I think it's been treating me well so far in the game. So I'll say that if you've watched my videos and you've liked the way that I've played and you want to try and emulate some of it, this is the way that I am playing the game currently. There are probably some other techniques and other tips and tricks that people have out there that are a little bit more refined and a little bit more advanced. This is what I am using as a basic setup, and I think is easy for a new player to start to grasp some of these concepts early on, and I reserve the right to be wrong, but for the time being, I think I'm doing all right. So, this first part is going to be directed almost solely inside the hangar, and we're going to go over some of the settings inside of the game and how to get your displays as well as your controls to emulate that I have. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to hit the escape button. We're going to go on up here to settings, and one of the first things that I think people either have engaged or don't have engaged that should have activated is under advanced settings on the bottom left hand side, and under more options you see that there is an automatic flaps. What this means is when you make a hard maneuver with the aircraft by moving the mouse drastically, you'll note that the flaps engage on aircraft that do have flaps activated on the airframes. Certain earlier airframes don't have flaps available, like a lot of the biplanes. It isn't usually until you get to about Tier 4 that you start to see flaps being an option on a bunch of the different aircraft. From here, let's go ahead and take a look at some of the other basic controls. When it comes to the flight controls, you have a manual extend flaps button down here in these two sections. I have mapped this to my mouse button 4 and 5. They're both next to each other, so I just kind of mash it in an instant. This is good for when you're heading in a straight line and you want to try and stop the aircraft by combining that with air brakes, which is going to be the S key by default. And holding down the flaps, you'll be able to reduce speed a lot faster than you would by just holding down the air brakes button. So a combination of these two is what allows me to be able to brake when I want to try and make a hard turn or if I want to stay behind a slower moving aircraft. Next thing is going to be the battle interface. Underneath this alternative interface mode, when you hold down the left Alt button by default, it'll allow you to get an alternate view. This will show you the types of airframes you're going up against by showing their icon on the mini-map as well as in the airspace of your field of view by representing them as an icon, as well as giving you the player names, helping you identify who you're flying up against, whether it's a bot or if you've identified certain players in the battle. I think that it is important to go ahead and hit right click on this one and change this to a press the key instead of hold the key. Two reasons. One, I don't like holding down any buttons while I'm flying my aircraft. I'd rather have it on a toggle if I can. So this puts it in the toggle mode by press the key, which means you only have to tap it and it'll stay in alternate view, and tap it to go back. Another reason I like having this set as a toggle is if you're holding down Alt in order to identify an enemy player, and you want to hit F4, which designates a target by putting them in your field of view, and you're still holding Alt for some reason, by default, Alt F4 is a Windows command to shut down the current program. So that is a bad combination, and I have spent many a battle having to relog and finding that my aircraft has either crashed into the dirt or was shut down because he was flying in a straight line in the middle of a dogfight. You can disable Windows commands, but I like having the ability to Alt-Tab between the game and going back to Windows, that way I can look up things on web pages while I'm waiting for games to load, or possibly adjusting some of my music that I'm listening to. So that's the way that I do it. Also, I need to manipulate the recording software. Not all of you are going to have that same issue, but that's the reasoning why I do the toggle system. For those of you who are wondering how I'm able to set up my HUD and the way that I have it set up, I'm going to go down here to General, and under Advanced Settings, down here underneath Flight Instruments, you have these three setups. You have altimeter, airspeed indicator, and pitch indicator. By selecting all of these, it will be, regardless of whether or not you have alt enabled or not, you will have the same information displayed. The altimeter will show you how high up and down you're going in your airframe, whether you're at a higher altitude or a lower altitude, and it will also indicate in yellow where your altitude ceiling is for that particular airframe. Airspeed indicator is represented on the left of the HUD, or the heads-up display, and it will also show you your max airspeed in a straight and level flight, as well as your minimum speed before your aircraft will begin to stall. And it will continue to move up and down in a scrolling scale on the left-hand side. Pitch indicator is something that I really like. It will also be on the right-hand side next to your altimeter, and will allow you to figure out whether or not you're actually flying level and what level of climb you have. Certain aircraft like to sit at a certain level of climb before they start to lose a lot of speed, or if I want to ensure I am getting a 90-degree pitch up on the aircrafts, that indicates your orientation in flight. And it's hard to get a perfectly level flight path without having this enabled, because you don't have a really good frame of reference if you're at altitude. The bank indicator. For the bank indicator, you can activate this, and there's two subcategories underneath. One is showing your orientation of your aircraft, and then the other is showing the horizon bank. I prefer to do this based on the aircraft bank opposed to the horizon bank, because I want to see the wings actually rolling, and this is really important for when you're zoomed in all the way to be able to see which way the aircraft is actually facing, because you want to have the wings perpendicular to where you're going to be turning next. Otherwise, you're going to find you have less response when you try to pull up on the airframe. Now taking a look at the crew tab, if you have an elated aircraft, which is represented by wreaths around the icon for the airframe, you can see in the example of the 410 here, they're next to the Roman numeral 4, or 6 rather, you'll see that there is the heavy symbol and it's bracketed by wreaths. This is opposed to the 109Z, which has not been fully unlocked and that is not elated. So when we look at the 109 who is elated and we hit the crew tab, there is an accelerated crew training button. By clicking accelerated crew training button, this means that your experience that you gain in this airframe will now be rolled into the crew itself, opposed to being built up as free experience. Now, it's not going to be true free experience, it's going to be in convertible free experience. So you can see here by clicking on the experience button on the right hand side, for a gold cost, I can convert the experience I have stockpiled. All of these aircraft I failed to elite early on, and as a result they have built up a bit of stockpile, or I've neglected to put them in advanced crew training rather, and I've stockpiled nearly 234,000 experience that could have been converted to pilot XP. That means that a lot of these pilots probably could have had more experience built on them and more skill points. Instead, it's sitting in this queue unusable unless I'm willing to spend real world money on being able to convert it with gold. This is a viable option for those of you who have cash to burn and would like to try and advance more quickly through the game. But for me, I would rather do it as free as humanly possible and spend my money on things that are more valuable, like premium time or possibly permanent camouflage for aircraft I know I'll be keeping, like premium aircraft or tier 10 aircraft. When it comes to the services tab, if any of you are interested in running universal ammo, this is where you select your different ammo types. For example, here we see for the 20mm cannons, the standard ammunition is represented by this kind of copper bronze looking colored ammo with no stripes associated with it, and as a result the silver cost is going to be 0 for refilling it. Very economical. However, for the universal ammo, you'll see that there is a price for universal ammo. Right now it's going to cost me 1200 silver to replenish this. Now that is minuscule when it comes to the machine guns, and I typically advocate using a universal ammo on machine gun setups because it helps augment the kind of low damage output of the guns. It's not going to increase the amount of damage, but it will increase the chance of starting the aircraft on fire, which will give you damage over time, as well as critical damage to the aircraft. Something to note is you'll see for the universal ammo, we have a 4-dot chance of fire opposed to a 2-dot chance of damage. But as we go up in caliber to the 20s, you see that it inverses, so we have less of a chance of fire but more of a chance of critical damage, and for the 30s it inverses even further. It appears as though the higher the caliber of the guns, the lower the chance of fire but the higher chance of critical damage. Critical damage is going to be damage to components or modules on the aircraft, taking out engines, the pilot, or possibly damaging some of the control surfaces, which is going to be represented by the changing of the colors of the wings or the tail, which will affect the aircraft in different ways. The wings will affect the roll more than it will the pitch control, and if you take out the tail, it'll affect your pitch control primarily, making it harder for you to actually engage in a turn. This is also where you choose your consumables. Some people try to save cash by not running consumables. I do not advocate this. I think it is important to run consumables on all of your airframes. And some of the staples are going to be a combination of fire extinguisher, first aid kit, pneumatic restarter to start the engine back up, and control surface trim, which repairs those damage controlled surfaces. So this is going to be the staple. If you don't use these, you don't have to pay to replenish them. I'd rather have them for the times that I'm like, no, I definitely need this right now. I'm going to go ahead and spend the credits on it and activate it, opposed to not spending the money to begin with and hoping that I don't need it. So by all means, please use these. I think you'll find that it's a huge benefit, and you're going to probably want to get used to using them early on. Now there's premium consumables as well. You note that there's 3 other ammo types here, and they cost real gold. And it's 6 gold per gun for this particular ammo type. It's 12 per gun of this ammo type, and 16 per gun for this ammo type. I don't see any reason why you would spend gold on ammo, with the exception of maybe Clan Wars. World of Tanks, which is another wargaming product that's been around for a much longer period of time, and I've played since its inception, did this originally and found it to be a poor business model and a poor game mechanic because it created a disparity and a bit of a pay-to-win aspect. I hope they do away with this, or at least make it an option for you to buy this ammo with in-game currency, as in the silver credits. But for the time being, I do not advocate using the gold ammo. Same thing goes for these automatic fire extinguishers, the first aid kits, the automatic restarter, and the automatic surface auto trim. All these do is activate automatically. So it just automatically turns it on. It also gives you a temporary resistance to your crew or to fire and your engines, but the bang for the buck isn't worth it to be spending that much gold on it. You may build up a few of these as a result of getting premium aircraft or possibly running missions, which is the only way I have any of these available to me at all at this point. When it comes to camouflage, there is multiple different options for camouflage. Concealment rating is dictated based on the camo for that particular map type. There's summer maps, winter maps, desert maps, and sea maps or marine maps. You might not like the camouflage, but these particular camouflages will be the best for being able to decrease your detection by the enemy by 10% on those particular battlefields. That reduces the chances of you getting focused early on and can possibly sneak in and get some damage on an enemy. I use this on a lot of my airframes that I am going to be keeping or that I find that I'm having trouble getting focused down in. It allows you to get a little bit more of a surprise on the enemy. It'll take 10% longer for the enemy to spot you because they'll have to get that much closer. I find this works really well for ground attackers that are flying at low altitude, and possibly for heavies that like to come in on a boom and zoom run, because by the time they realize you're there, you're already on their tail and causing damage. But I don't suggest getting the forever camo for gold. It costs too much money unless you're going to be keeping that airframe forever. Chances are I'm going to finish with one of these aircraft relatively quickly, and when I finish with that aircraft, I'm going to need to roll into another airframe. So once I sell that, all of that camouflage all that money I spent on camouflage is now wasted because that airframe is no longer being used. I don't get a refund on that gold spent. So I reserve this for my tier 10s or any aircraft that I know that I'll be keeping forever, such as my XF5U Pancake. I know I'm keeping that, so I'd be willing to spend gold on it, and I did spend gold in order to get the Flying Squirrel camouflage. No, I do not want to apply. Boom. Because I like it and I know I'll keep the airframe. So I believe this pretty much wraps it up at this stage for the in the hangar portion. Part 2 will be in flight, and we'll talk about some of the game mechanics. We won't specifically talk about the airframe types until probably another video, and that may be a whole other series talking about how I play each one of those particular aircraft. I talk about it a little bit when I review some of these airframes, but I'm going to dedicate one video to each one and talk about them specifically and how they work. Hopefully you guys enjoy the video, and as always, like, favorite, comment, subscribe, and let me know what you think, and let me know what you like and didn't like so we can adjust the videos in the future, and I'll catch you on the next one.